Picture this, okay? It's 1810 in Mercer County, Pennsylvania. 14 years have gone by since a totally unforgiving wilderness was first cleared by hand to build what is now a thriving frontier farm. Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're not just rattling off dates and facts. No, we are stepping directly into the mud, the sweat, and the incredible resilience of early American settlement. And we're doing it through the eyes of one specific household. Okay, let's dive right into this. First, we'll meet the Carringer family. Second, building a frontier farm. Third, learning on the frontier. Fourth, a growing frontier society. And fifth, frontier entertainment. All right, Section 1, meet the Carringer family. Let's step intimately inside the log cabin to see who actually lived there. 10. I mean, that is a massive number, and it represents the amount of people living under the Carringer roof in 1810. Just imagine the sheer scale of responsibility resting squarely on the shoulders of the 52-year-old patriarch, Martin Carringer. You know, feeding, clothing, and sheltering 10 people in a world where literally everything you consumed had to be made or grown by your own two hands, it's just an astonishing feat. And look at this incredible age spread. You have Martin and his wife Molly, who's 42. But notice the children. This was very much a household in transition. You've got Jacob at 25, recently married, practically nearing full independence, all the way down to little Joseph, who is just 5 years old. Now, on the frontier, a 5-year-old wasn't just, playing in the dirt all day. Little Joseph was just starting to learn his daily chores. So the older kids were basically adults, while the younger ones were stepping right into the schoolroom of daily farm labor. Section 2, building a frontier farm. Let's head outside the cabin and look at the brutal division of labor that kept them alive. If you think of a frontier farm as a modern business, you really have to look at Martin and Molly as the co-CEOs of a highly complex enterprise. Martin and his sons managed the heavy agricultural cycle, right? Out there plowing fields with oxen, planting corn, splitting rails for fences. Meanwhile, Molly and her daughters managed an absolutely critical domestic economy. I mean, they weren't just cooking. They were spinning flax, weaving cloth, making soap, and preserving the food to ensure the family didn't literally starve during the winter. Both sides of this equation were entirely codependent. If one side failed, the whole shebang collapsed. So the crucial point here is the sheer unrelenting seasonality of all this work. Just look at this endless backbreaking cycle. In the spring, they're plowing and planting crops like wheat and flax. By fall, they are harvesting and literally beating the grain by hand with flails just to thresh it. And winter? Well, winter certainly wasn't for resting. Winter was for clearing new grounds, splitting heavy wooden rails, and keeping livestock alive in the freezing cold. Martin and his older sons lived their lives dictated entirely by this intense three-step rhythm. And hey, let's not forget the youngest members of the team. Frontier survival depended on absolutely everyone. The youngest kids, Henry, Solomon, and Joseph, had zero room for idleness. There was no such thing as a weekend for a frontier kid. Their hands were constantly needed for gathering eggs, hauling heavy loads of wood and water, and endless garden weeding. It was a rigorous, highly functional childhood for sure. Section 3, learning on the frontier. Let's shift from physical survival to mental development. First, we kind of have to define how formal schooling even happened out there in the wild. Enter subscription schools. Now, Pennsylvania wouldn't actually establish a free public school system until 1834, which is well over 2 decades later. So in 1810, if you wanted your kids to learn to read, your family had to pool resources with neighboring families to hire a traveling teacher for just a few winter months when farm labor eased up a bit. They'd all meet in a cramped log cabin, using whatever books they happened to have lying around, usually just a family Bible or maybe a spelling book. And this brilliantly illustrates the actual breakdown of a frontier child's education, which is just fascinating. Look at that tiny 15% slice for formal schooling. Academic learning was an absolute luxury. The vast majority of their education, a whopping 50%, was a practical apprenticeship. Sons learning animal husbandry from Martin, daughters learning to weave and make cheese from Molly. Another massive 35% was religious instruction at home, memorizing scripture and catechism. So they were educated for exactly the world they lived in, one of deep faith and intense practical survival. Section 4, a growing frontier society. Let's zoom out a bit and see how they interacted with their newly formed community. Let's see how this community builds over time. Look at this rapid evolution. In 1795, Martin arrives in a raw, totally untouched wilderness. Just 4 years later, in 1799, he's the largest subscriber to the local Presbyterian church. And by our focus year of 1810, it's become a genuine society. Those scattered, isolated cabins have turned into actual thriving neighborhoods, alongside families like the McCrackens and the Minnesses. It's a powerful reminder of how incredibly fast the American frontier organized itself into functional communities. Now, with the community comes civic responsibility, especially for a founding father of the township like Martin. His macro-level responsibilities were intense. He wasn't just passively paying taxes on his land and livestock. He was expected to contribute literal, physical labor to keep the frontier roads clear. He had to serve on juries. He was required to attend militia musters. The social fabric out there required everyone's active physical participation just to hold together. Section 5, Frontier Entertainment. Let's look at how work actually met play. You see, when isolation is your biggest enemy, you kind of have to turn your chores into parties. Look at this vibrant list of communal gatherings. We're talking barn raisings, log rollings, quilting bees. These were absolutely crucial social lifelines. They brought isolated neighbors together to share food, swap gossip, and share the overwhelming physical burden of massive projects. Even religious revivals and those mandatory militia musters doubled as major social events, drawing families from miles around just to reconnect. I really love this specific detail from the source material. It says corn huskings were autumn highlights. Given Martin's later reputation for generosity with his corn harvest, these gatherings likely held special meaning in the Carringer household. Corn was literally Martin's favorite crop, and you can just imagine the pride and joy he took in hosting these highly competitive, lively autumn gatherings, handing out prizes, and sharing his harvest with all his neighbors. It really brings his personality right out of the history books and brings it to life. So, what does this all mean for us? Well, it leaves us with this final thought. Look at your own life today. Could your family survive this intense division of labor? Could you successfully operate as co-CEOs of your own survival, relying entirely on your own hands and the tightly knit support of your neighbors just to make it through a freezing winter? The Carringers didn't just survive it, they built a legacy on it. It's a fascinating lens through which to view all of our modern conveniences. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I really hope it changes how you think about a hard day's work.